I'd like to welcome everyone here. I'm Peter San, President of Heep Association. 歡迎大家嚟到我哋今日呢個seminar。我係冼榮基，係Heep會嘅會長。我睇到咧今日咧可能有好多朋友咧就唔係一定係家長嘅，所以咧我今日咧就會簡單咧介紹一下Heep會。I've seen that there are people from different sector of the developmental service sector, not just parents, so I'll give a brief introduction of Heep Association. Heep Association was formed in 1999, 10 years ago, by a group of Chinese parents, and we started in small, and then now we have the largest network in Toronto area. We are now a charitable non-profit organization registered in the province of Ontario. 我哋咧係喺10年前咧開始嘅，1999年嗰陣時開始，係一個係好有幾位家長咧，佢哋係團結埋一齊咧，係搞到呢個協會。咁咧就但係而家10年咧已經過啦，咁就我哋而家已經係一個註冊嘅非牟利慈善機構。最近咧我哋都攞咗係呢個慈善嘅號碼咧，咁所以咧就係如果大家要捐助嘅時候咧，我哋可以俾翻呢個 tax receipt 俾大家嘅。我哋咧所有嘅工作人員咧，其實我哋都係呢個義工嚟嘅，咁所以咧如果大家咧係想參加我哋行列咧，都可以歡迎大家嚟到同我哋傾下嘅。All of us are volunteer and we welcome everyone's contribution. Apart from supporting families, we also outreach to agencies. In fact, today, the seminar, we outreach to agencies helping people with due diagnosis, and it is through DSTO Toronto. In fact, one of our director at the Heep Association, Renee Kwan, she is a council member at DSTO. 我哋咧係除咗係幫助家長之外咧，我哋亦都係亦都出邊咧係同其他嘅機構咧係聯絡嘅。好似今日咁咧，就係我哋係經過多倫多嘅 DSTO 呢個機構咧，係同Griffin Centre 咧同埋呢個係 CAMH 呢兩間係處理雙重斷症嘅機構咧係合作嘅。咁所以咧就我哋今日都好開心見到呢個合作。咁today we have this seminar, and then we're very glad to invite Dr. Jonathan Weiss on my right-hand side here, and also Dr. Yona Lansky to come and make a presentation. For more detail, I'll ask Renee to introduce them. 今日咧我哋好高興咧請到咧係 Dr. Jonathan Weiss 同埋咧 Dr. Yona Lansky。咁佢哋咧會係做今日嘅 presentation。咁如果如果大家有對協會有啲咩其他問題咧，可以係直接揾我啦。
So we're very glad to be here. 3 things today that we're going to do. We're going to talk about what specific terms mean. Intellectual disability, autism, and dual diagnosis. And then we want to spend some time talking about why people with developmental disabilities or intellectual disabilities have mental health problems, and also some things that we can do to understand and help our children better when they have those problems.
3樣咧，第一樣咧就係嗰個智障，第二就係孤獨症，第3咧就係個雙重嘅診斷。係啦，我哋今日咧就會講下咧，就係點解嗰個有智障嘅人咧就會出現心理健康嘅問題。如果同埋咧，我哋點樣處理呢一類嘅心理問題？首先咧，我哋就有同一樣嘅共識，就係嗰啲特別嘅名詞係乜嘢意思。咁我哋咧就講嘅時候就唔會亂啦。
We start talking about people who have an intellectual disability or a developmental disability. There's lots of different labels that have been used historically, and you might have heard of developmental delay, developmental disability, mental retardation. So when we're talking about intellectual disability, all of these terms have been used before to describe intellectual disability. So what does it mean to have a diagnosis of an intellectual disability? It means 2 things. One, to have that diagnosis, you need to have significant difficulties with problem solving, with intellectual functioning, compared to other people your age. And this is usually determined, this is determined by standardized IQ testing that usually is done with a psychologist who sits down and does a lot of different problem-solving tasks with a person. But it's more than just about problem solving. It's also about independent living. You can have problems with problem solving, difficulties, but in the community be completely okay, so you wouldn't have a diagnosis of intellectual disability. What you also need is to have difficulties with independent living. And these two problems are expected to happen early in life, that they're not supposed to just start to emerge when somebody's already an adult. So in the diagnosis, we look for these difficulties in some point before the age of 18. So what's really important is that if we're talking with somebody who's an adult and we want to know about intellectual disability, one of the main questions is, what was this person like when they were a child, right? What were they like when they were going through school, in elementary school and in high school? Because that's an important piece of the picture to understand whether this person always has had an intellectual disability.
喺嗰個智力方面解決問題嗰方面咧，你就冇係嗰個同樣年齡嗰個人咁樣嘅能力。嗱，咁我哋點樣去知道佢有冇嗰個困難咧？我哋就會有個心理班咧，有種特別咁樣嘅智商嘅測驗去測驗一下。嗱，咁除咗係話能夠解決日常嘅問題咧之外咧，仲要係有能力係能夠嗰個獨立咁樣去生存，獨立咁去生活。多數呢一類，如果發覺係有問題，多數係嗰個係年輕嘅時候，即係18歲以前，就唔會係喺嗰個18歲以後或者咁所謂嗰個智障問題咧，我哋就會睇佢年輕嘅時候，嗰個讀書嘅時候，後生啲嘅時候，佢哋有冇同類嘅問題喺學習。
Overall, a lot of times parents and people ask, well, how many people have intellectual disability? And it's very difficult to find one great number, but we often say it's thought that between 1 and 3% of Canadians have an intellectual disability. Now, intellectual disability is different than autism spectrum disorder. So it's important that we also talk about autism spectrum disorder. Because overall, a lot of people have an intellectual disability and autism, but some people just have a diagnosis of autism. So I want to spend a bit of time talking about that now. And autism, we hear a lot of this in the news, right? Have you guys heard about autism in newspaper articles or on television recently? It's getting a lot of focus because we're realizing more and more that lots of people have an autism spectrum disorder. But when we talk about spectrum disorder, what we're really talking about is a cluster of difficulties. Not that everybody looks the same way. In fact, everybody looks very different, unique, but everybody shares a cluster of problems. And I'm going to talk a bit about what that cluster looks like. So if you think about it, the term autism spectrum disorder is like an umbrella. And under that umbrella, there are lots of different diagnoses that you can have. The first diagnosis that you can have is what's called PDD-NOS, which stands for Pervasive Developmental Disorder Not Otherwise Specified. It's a global term. But some other people who have an autism spectrum disorder have a different diagnosis, one of autism. And other people still, they might not have a diagnosis of autism, but they might have a diagnosis of Asperger's syndrome.